Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. On the show today, we focus on India's new counter-terrorism policy unveiled by the Ministry of Home Affairs, a strategy titled PRAHAAR. Designed as a proactive and comprehensive framework, PRAHAAR seeks to address the evolving nature of terror threats, preventing attacks, responding decisively and strengthening national resilience. So let's take a quick look at what PRAHAAR stands for. PRAHAAR outlines a 7-layered strategy, which stands for prevention of terror attacks to protect the citizens and their interests, response that is swift and proportionate to the threat posed, aggregating the capacities to ensure a whole of government synergy, also human rights and rule of law based processes in counter-terror efforts, accentuating enabling conditions including radicalization, aligning international efforts to combat terrorism globally, and recovery and resilience through a whole of society approach. That's what PRAHAAR stands for. The ministry has underlined that while terror threats are constantly evolving in form, in technology and in scale, India's position remains unwavering, that is, zero tolerance for terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. The policy reiterates India's long-standing belief that there can be no justification for violence and that the rights of victims must remain central. It also commits to criminalizing all terrorist acts, the choking of funds, weapons and safe havens, and countering the misuse of information and communications technology for terrorist purposes. So how robust is this 7-layered framework? Does PRAHAAR adequately address the emerging technological risks? To explore some of these questions, we are joined by two distinguished guests. Let me begin by introducing them to you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome on this edition of Perspective, Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, retired. He is currently Director General, Center for Land Warfare Studies. General Singh, thank you for joining us on the program. Welcome to Sansad TV. I'm also pleased to welcome on the telecast Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired. He is Director, India Foundation. General Katoch, thank you for your time as well. Welcome to Sansad TV. So to begin with, help us and our viewers understand why was it needed. General Singh, coming to you first. All this while, for years, India's response to terror had been reactive. Now this framework completely shifts the doctrine in the manner in which we respond to terrorist activities. It was long overdue, but a much needed significant step. What's your take?
Absolutely, Tina. I think you're absolutely right that it was a long needed step which we had to take. You see, a policy or a doctrine puts people in a focus. So all the operatives, all the stakeholders, actors who are involved in the dealing of counter-terror operations have a strategic guideline and guidance. With that, I would also like to say that it's a very commendable step because it is actually leading to our entire shift in the approach to dealing with terrorism, and which is offensive in intent. Now, whether it is completely fulfilling the requirements of a full-fledged counter-terrorism policy or a doctrine, I have certain reservations on them. It is, first of all, declaratory in nature in the sense that it has got a broad guideline, but there are certain things which are missing and which need to be highlighted in a strategic document like this, such as the command and control of the entire apparatus of a CT structure.
Right.
Secondly, there is also a need for a holistic national security strategy, and this should have formed part of that particular strategy. If you look at the international environment, you will find that countries like US, UK, they first issue a national security strategy, doctrine, policy and doctrine. Thereafter, there are sub parts of that. So counter-terrorism is sub part of an overall national security strategy. So I hope the Ministry of Defense and the National Security Council take a note of this and actually issue a national security policy, which is again a very, very long awaited document. We just have a RM's directive to work upon. I think there is a need for us to come out with a very, very holistic national security strategy and policy document. I'm sure General Dhruv Katoj would also agree with me. There are issues of command and control between the army and the Central Armed Police Forces and the police forces. I was myself involved in a major incident, Pathankot attack, where I had led the attack as IG NSG. There is a doubt in who will be commanding these forces once the army sets in. So there are such strategic issues which need to be highlighted as part of our doctrine. I think we need to work upon it a little more. We need to come out with a comprehensive national security strategy. So I'll stop here and I will take on the questions as we come along.
Certainly, we'll touch upon how the implementation on the ground will look like in terms of making this doctrine practically applicable. Most importantly, what's the way forward with threats constantly evolving? These are some aspects that we will discuss in due course of the program. General Katoj, let me get in your opening remarks first on the doctrine, because what we see is this policy reiterates India's zero tolerance stance on terrorism. Do you see this doctrine now sort of formalizing or institutionalizing all that's been said regarding India's stance on terrorism, or are there new dimensions that the strategy also talks about?
Thank you, Tina. Firstly, I would like to say this doctrine marks a fundamental shift in the way we look at terror. Earlier we had that policy of strategic restraint. Now, strategic restraint really meant that whatever happens, we will ensure we don't go to war. So it was a very restrictive policy that we will not go beyond a certain stage. So what we did in those times, you increase the level of patrolling on the border so that infiltration doesn't take place. You try to create situations with the security apparatus that no incident takes place. But once an incident has taken place, we really had no option or response, which is why we suffered a very large number of casualties over the years. When you look at the temple attack in Gujarat, then you look at the Parliament attack, when you look at the Mumbai attacks, in all of them we exercised this very magical word called strategic restraint, which really meant that if we actually take very serious action, we'll go to war, and we don't want to go to war. Now, I think the first time when this particular policy changed was in 2016, when the surgical strikes took place. Now, at that point of time, you will recollect, Pakistan had made it very clear that if anything happens, we will go nuclear. So that was the first time we busted the nuclear bluff. And the second time we busted it was 2019. So this is the first time when you saw a shift in our strategy from strategic restraint to limited deterrence. And now when we have come to the Sindoor stage, I think it is a completely different kettle of fish now. It is the whole of government approach where the perpetrators are going to be held accountable. Earlier, we were simply dealing with the terrorists. Now we will deal with the sponsors of terror, which means if it's a question of dealing with Pakistan, we'll deal with their army.
So, General Katoj, if we want to make our viewers understand, summarize what this doctrine clearly means, in the wake of the evolving threats, in the wake of what happened last year, the Operation Sindoor, and in the wake of the kind of statements that are being made on the interventions that took place between India and Pakistan in stopping that war, what is the biggest strategic message that India has tried to give out through this doctrine, both domestically, in the neighborhood, internationally, about how India is going to deal with terrorism going forward?
I think, I'll just give it in three very simple points. One, there will be no fear of nuclear retaliation. The bogey of nuclear war has been eliminated, and we have made it very clear. The Prime Minister in his statement continuously has said, it doesn't, it's not going to happen. We have a nuclear policy, and if Pakistan tries to break it, they know the consequences. This is one. Number two, it is going to be a whole of government approach. It is simply not the military now. The whole nation gets involved, which is why the Indus Water Treaty is part of this system now. When we say blood and water will not flow together, it will not flow together. So there will be economic pressures, there will be diplomatic pressures also being applied along with military measures. And the third aspect is the military. Now, there will be a response. It is no longer going to be confined to, just dealing with the terrorists. We will deal with the sponsors. If the geography is not a limit, they could be located anywhere within Pakistan. We'll take them on anywhere, and it will be, force will be used. in whichever manner, either by air, by sea, or by land. That element has also been built in. And the sponsors, that means the Pakistan military will no longer be subject to, we would earlier say that we will not touch them. We will only deal with the terrorists. But now we will deal with the military also. And the first step, if something should go wrong, we'll do it. And lastly, while doing this, we will exercise escalation control. That means we will try to stop it at every stage till such time as Pakistan behaves. So in broad terms, I think we are moving now to a policy from strategic restraint to limited deterrence to deterrence. And finally, we will move to compellence. We will compel Pakistan to behave and stop terrorism. Otherwise, we will continue in this manner.
Okay, okay. So while it marks a fundamental shift in how we respond to terrorism and terrorist activities, General Singh, taking on the point about the whole of government synergy, in practical terms, how well integrated are our systems at intelligence levels, at the police levels, at the paramilitary levels, and of course the armed forces in making the whole of government approach realistic and implementable on the ground, given that our security threats are going to increase and most importantly the technological risks continue to evolve. That's something that we will delve in greater detail, but just to get a sense from you on how this whole of government synergy is going to work in the times to come.
Okay, thank you, Tina. I think that's a very good question, and that is what I was hinting in my opening remarks. And I, having served on either side of the fence, in the sense I was IG NSG, so I had the police view as well, and also I am basically an army man, so I also have the other side full view. What I realized was that whereas there is a process of national response to counter-terror operations and anti-hijack operations, there is a lack of synergy in terms of execution because of lack of structure at the apex level. And these are related to two things. One is related to the command and control at the strategic level. Who will be commanding an operation of counter-terror? Should it go beyond the internal security level? Which I mean to say is that the level of attack which takes place is beyond the local control or beyond the control of the central armed police forces. At that point, there is a certain amount of gap in command and control that should have been part of this particular policy directive. The second issue is about the intelligence sharing. While the MAC, SMAC, all these organizations have been revived or reviewed and restructured after the Kargil committee report and also after the various attacks on various terror attacks which were taking place, their functioning has been disjointed. In my view, this has to be controlled not at the MHA level. This has to be controlled at the level of the NSCS. In my recommendation in various articles also, I have been mentioning this issue that there has to be a deputy NSA level coordination where all the agencies have to be coordinated with a singular purpose. Then only we will get the whole of a nation approach. And otherwise what happens is that the NSA steps in an ad hoc manner. Let it be formalized in a manner that any counter-terror operation which is of a nature like Parliament attack or Pahalgam attack, there should be apex level organization. My suggestion is NSA. So there is a little bit of a gap there, what you are suggesting, that needs to be addressed and should have been addressed in this particular doctrine. And I had spoken about it also yesterday on some of the channels. The second issue is about even the technological synergy which is required in such operations is currently fragmented. Now, for example, certain things are looked after by NTRO, certain things are looked after by the IB, then there is there are other agencies like ARC, etc. So there has to be some kind of I would say a structure which should be able to coordinate the intelligence of the country.
That's right.
Then only you will have the OODA loop coming fast. OODA means, you are able to detect. Prevention is first of all detect. And if you can detect that particular activity, you don't have to fight actually. You might have to actually take a proactive action and stop it or nip it at the bud. So whole of a nation approach requires strategic cooperation. That's one. Secondly, even today in today's context where everybody is affected, The battlefield has become non-linear. So therefore, your civil administration also have to equally play ball. For example, in Sindoor, if the civil administration has to support the operations of the defense forces, they need to be aware as to how to use the home guard, how to use the firefighter. How we were lucky that we didn't get any strikes back onto us, because we are now raising the level of escalation. As General Katoj mentioned, now the escalation will be proportionate but not restricted. There's a difference. It will be proportionate but not restricted. Should you raise the level, we will raise the level.
Absolutely.
Until you stop. And if this has to escalate, we will go up to a certain level. Of course, there are other considerations when we do an escalation management. So even the civil administration has to now be absolutely active. They have to be on the same page. I have my own experiences where I find that there are certain very senior level officers who really do not have the exact idea of how to react. We have fought the last war in 1971, which was truly a national war. After that, Kargil was a very, very restricted war. Today, because of the changed nature of the long-range fires which the adversary has, both on the west and the north, the entire country is under a threat. So, escalation management is easier said than done. We were very, very good in the Op Sindoor, that we were able to stop the whole thing at after 88 hours. This needs a little more fine tuning. So, as a part of whole of nation approach, I think everybody has to be on the gear. Even you. I was in a webinar where on the other side there was a bad situation of some country. I don't want to mention that country. And the DG said that, Janal Singh, should I hear the sound of siren, please pardon us, we will run away from here and go on to our shelters. That has to be the response now if we have to achieve a whole of a nation approach.
That's right. I think very significant points that you've made based on your experience and observances. We understand that the intent through this policy has been demonstrated. It has to be implemented in realistic terms, and that's where these recommendations and suggestions in how they can be implemented effectively will be vital. General Katoj, given the security dynamics, especially on our western and northern borders, how critical is intelligence infusion in making that prevention credible? That's, I think, the most important part. There are some gaps that need to be filled, and especially in context of intelligence sharing in terms of that whole of nation approach to be implementable and practical and effectively implemented. I think these are some aspects that have to be going forth, should be taken care of as we move towards the implementation phase, isn't it?
Yes. Actually, the most important part was the intent. Now, if you don't have that, if you don't have the political will, it doesn't matter what you do, nothing will work. So the political will has come in. That is why PRAHAAR.
Right.
So I think it's a very, very important first step. But what General Chauhan has said, I totally agree with him. You see, now is you got to fine tune it. Now, intelligence is the key. Any weakness in the intelligence setup, and we have, there will be damage to that extent. So we have to get the intelligence structures right. But let us also understand there is no intelligence which is 100%. The Americans have, the Americans couldn't get it, the Israelis couldn't get it, the Russians couldn't get it, the Chinese can't get it. But we do the best we can. So we, the agencies have to operate in such a manner. And at the apex level, at the NSA level, as very rightly said, you should have a deputy NSA who's specifically looking into this, as a one point of accountability. Mm-hmm. So once this intelligence riddle is sorted out, I think a very large number of the other problems will go away. The second point is when we're talking of the leadership, I think these 2 points which General Chauhan has said are totally valid. Your intelligence, you've got to get that right. And, the command and control structures, who is going to operate? There's a very simple philosophy, I would say, wherever the armed forces get in, they take over. The armed forces will not work under the police forces. That is the bottom line. So there should be those structures created. Yes, if the army or the air force or any, the military is involved, everybody comes under them. So let us say if it's a naval operation or something, then perhaps the Navy or the Air Force can take it, or even the Army can take it. If it's a land operation, by and large, it will be the Army dominant operations. So those structures actually they have to be put into the policy frameworks as to when we are executing it, how do we do it. But as I told you right in my beginning, I think we never had that intent. Even when we went for Kargil, remember, we were trying escalation control. We don't want to go to war. when these people had infiltrated and taken our territory. So we restricted it to that area. But now the message has to be passed very clearly to Pakistan. Every inch of Pakistani territory is open to attack. And I agree, they can also do it to us. So it's our ability to bear the pain. Let us be very certain, you cannot punish somebody if you are not prepared to take it yourself. So the nation has to be resolute. The districts, today the war is not confined to the front. The war could actually start in, as remote a place as Gujarat or Mumbai or in Madhya Pradesh or anywhere. The borders are not necessarily the front line. The whole country is the front line. So the district administration, the state administration, they have to be clued up that in the event of hostilities, what do they do?
In fact, that brings me to the next question, which the framework also talks about, is accentuating conditions that enable terrorism, including radicalization. It's mentioned in the policy. How are we dealing with issues like radicalization, taking on homegrown terrorism? Because for long, we've suffered at the hand of homegrown terrorism as well. It's not always been sponsored from across the border. How are we dealing with radicalization through misinformation, through fake news on various digital platforms, and especially in this age of social media where rumors fly thick and fast, General Katoch? What kind of intent and what kind of progress have we made in dealing with some of these threats?
No, when you're looking at social media, I think we have to be very proactive. That means, just to give you an example, the army during Operation Sindoor, they had a cell created. So anytime fake information would come, they would give out the counter. Unless you work in real time, the fake news factory will overtake you. And the enemy, like the Pakistani agencies in Sindoor, they were well at it. So one is sensitization of the public. Firstly, that this type of fake news will come in. Otherwise, you've had incidences where people from the northeast were targeted, or people from other communities were targeted, and by and large from fake news. Information warfare is going to be very, very critical in the days to come, regardless of the policies which we follow. And I think this is something which we need to look into very, very seriously. Tina.
General Singh, misuse of digital platforms by the terrorist groups has been a global concern. It's not just India that is battling, and especially now with emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, the threat is only going to become bigger and bigger. How prepared are we in dealing with these challenges? So it's not just on the ground that we need to be prepared in terms of taking on terrorism. There are these invisible, arenas where we need to fight these battles as well.
Tina, I think if you ask me, one biggest challenge which we have today, and that is the digital revolution. Now, digital revolution has brought the world in the palm of a person. Now, this palm of this person has become a unilateral warfare machine. Even an individual who is not in any way related to security related operations can actually start a war. That's the biggest danger. Now, how do we tackle it? I would say that we were a laggard in this. I mean, let's face the fact that we did not really focus upon it in the right way as we would have. Operation Sindoor, in my view, was the first time that we actually decided on a line of operation for narrative warfare and information warfare. Yeah. Unfortunately, somewhere in the middle, we lost ground again. And that was because of 2-3 reasons. One, our adversary has already mastered this particular art. But more importantly, the northern adversary was totally colluding. For example, we are having this discussion. Similar discussion was taking place on the other side, where they were discussing that, okay, India lost XYZ number of aircrafts. Now, there were just about 800-900 views by the time this particular podcast finished. But believe you me, next day morning when I got up and I saw the Chinese media, there were 50.3 million views on that. That got picked up immediately by Al Jazeera, Western news media, and it became a total belief that yes, we lost. So the technology also is playing a very great importance, and it is here that we need to bring both them together. The content writers, the information warriors, and the technological geeks, I would put them. on one page, and there is no harm. Everything is fair in love and war. So if technology will give us that heft, might as well do it. So it is now time, with this kind of a positive outlook of a counter-terror policy, where we are looking at a proactive stance, which is actually also the first step to narrative warfare. Let me tell you, by putting this out in writing, we have conveyed to our adversaries leadership such as Munir, or various prime minister of the Western adversary, or the Chinese also. I don't mind calling them out. They have now got a message that yes, if on the top we are believing like this, then on ground, imagine what would be happening. And I can assure you, on the ground, a lot of work is happening. We've got Mythbuster, which is now active almost daily. Anything which is coming out from serving officers is being actually manipulated by the adversary into a totally different message, targeting our religious sentiments and things like that. That is getting immediately countered. So we are at it. I would only tell you that with passage of time, we should be able to deal with this particular threat quite effectively and in an offensive manner. Now we are not looking at countering, actually, Tina. We are not looking at countering. We are looking at creating a narrative which hurts them.
In fact, we've seen that kind of effort being undertaken post-Operation Sindoor, when we saw Indian delegations traveling across continents to present the Indian side of the story, General Katoch. But the question here is, on information warfare, initially we didn't care enough because we knew what we were doing. Domestically, we were just convincing our people what we were doing. But on the international front, perhaps we weren't bothered much. Post-Operation Sindoor, we realized where we were lagging behind, and we sort of tried to up our game. How can we build this up? Because it does matter. On the international stage, the narrative warfare does matter, something that we saw clearly during Operation Sindoor.
Actually, Tina, the narrative warfare matters even in the domestic in the domestic stage. Yes. Today, it is, in my view, the most important part of warfare. It is not your missiles. It is not your guns. It is information. And if you win you win the war with the guns and your armed forces, and you lose it on the narrative ground, I think that is a very sorry state of affairs. Pakistan has, let's face it, they have consistently done well in narrative warfare. And there's a reason for that, that ISPR is directly, directly controls the entire narrative in the whole country. We don't have one single agency. When I was in clause, we had written a paper, and we had recommended that we need to have something like a national information advisor online with a national security advisor. That is the type of importance we need to give to information. It is a very, very complex subject. It is a very costly subject also. That means to implement an information strategy, we are talking in the terms of 100,000 crore rupees, something. It is a very, very expensive business. The Americans spend more on information warfare than perhaps the entire India's defense budget, and yet they don't get it right. So it is not something that just because we are spending money, we are going to get it right, or we will get it right every time. It is a game. We will try to do our best. The opponent will also do what he can. But I think it is important to sensitize India's public. These are the things which are going to happen. When people are sensitized, then the public is your best bet, to ensure that fake propaganda is not doesn't spread, and that the line which we are taking as a nation, that goes out.
Absolutely. I think so. In addition to the whole of government approach, what's also needed is a whole of society approach, which will ensure that misinformation is not passed on, which will ensure that radicalization is prevented at different levels, and most importantly, that resilience which is required should be there at the societal level. So this PRAHAAR, it's a 7-layered framework that the Ministry of Home Affairs has released to counter terrorism, but I think it's a national commitment, and it involves commitment from the society as much as from the different stakeholders who will make this really effective and implementable on the ground. Time allows us to take up only that much on the program, gentlemen. Thank you once again, General Singh, General Katoch, for joining us with your insights and views, and to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.